And then I'll drop that link back in there.
All right, it's official, Joe. We're being live streamed. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off. So, all right. So, hey, so I'm gonna stop sharing and say, um, hey everyone, thanks for joining our very first after show. So we have just come out of one of our webinars that we do in partnership with SCORE New York Metro, and we wanted to try something fun and new. And what it is just one-on-one, not with the camera on the screen, just answering some questions that you sent in ahead of time, or Joe can continue to pull. We're going to hang out here and cover a few more things. But for those of you who might be joining, I wanted to know, well, our webinar was all about selling through discovery platforms. And so we talked about today selling online on TikTok and Instagram, but also through platforms like Etsy, Amazon. So we're going to continue that discussion. And so, Joe, I know you have some really great questions that you sent over. If we could jump back to some of those, because I think would be great to start with ones that are kind of people who didn't get a chance to see the webinar and might want to just get a quickie. And those of people still hanging out will get a little refresher.
Yeah, absolutely. Number of questions to go through. Thank you all for being here. Um, Obviously it's going to vary depending on the platform, but how would people go about setting up these stores if they're just starting from the very beginning, they have no background? What would be like your top recommendations in terms of going to set up the store?
It's a really good question. So there's a couple of important things that we have to remember from the very beginning is when starting from scratch, what is helpful to know is if you're already selling. So if you have a store already, you are already someone who is a couple of steps further down. The reason I bring that up is because different platforms have eligibility requirements, and some of them require that you have been selling already. So, for example, to sell on Pinterest, your store has to have already been live for a year. So you can't decide tomorrow to start a jewelry business, right? And go, oh, I want to sell it on Pinterest. But for those of you who are starting completely from scratch, that's where some of the marketplaces that might support that are great. So, for example, in Etsy, you don't have to have an existing business or been in business online for years. So, one of the things I recommend that you do is understand where you are today and look at the eligibility requirements of the platform that you're considering. And then the second thing about that is I always want us to remember to consider the platform based on who we're selling to and what we're selling and our personalities. Because if we don't drink the Kool-Aid, if it's not a platform we would shop on, it's going to be really hard for us to really get into it and get excited about
Yeah, that is absolutely for sure. Uh,
it.
awesome. So our next question is how do you go about managing inventory and pricing? What's the best way to like organize all of this? You know, especially if they're jumping into or are on a few different platforms. How should they be going about managing, you know, inventory and pricing?
Such a good question. So, first off, Joe, you and I have dealt with this on with clients, right? So inventory in
Mhm.
general. So I know everyone thinks they're going to sell a million things right out of the gate, right? But one of the things that we always have to remember is it's okay to only have so many. And that's actually one of the things some of the platforms really lean into. So think about like an Etsy, right? It's okay if you sell out of things because scarcity is actually a thing that works for you on a platform like that. And then you'll learn, okay, I have to make more of this. So when you're first starting out, I would say, you want to create as much as you can carry and also have a plan for what else you would do with it if it doesn't sell. So very important to think about that, right? Then as you start to learn what people are buying, and of course, look at the competitors are out there. But again, if you only have so much money, or the second thing is, what do you have to do a run of? So when you are buying something fashion related and you're the designer, you have a minimum. So that's oftentimes a great place to start. Because you're a new business, you have no purchase history. So you don't know how fast it's going to sell. And so you are going to have to give it a little time, right? You got to get out there and sell. And then if you put them up and they sell within a month, then as you start to see them sell, you're going to have to call that person and order more. And you need to start to learn to pace the process. And this is going to take time. It's going to be, I hate to say the word, but it's going to come out. It's a guessing game. And anyone who has started a business with inventory is going to tell you that. So it's sometimes, especially when you're a startup and you're sometimes bootstrapping it, it might be better to buy less and sell and then start to see how it's doing and then put your larger orders in. And that point, then it'll be easier for you to start to find partners who can give you things at better volume, right? So this is where we talk about profitability or the percentage. But like if we're talking about selling on like a Poshmark, those are oftentimes one-off things that you're selling here or there, right? Or you might be the one that's going around picking up the closeouts yourself at some places and then putting them on there because you know how to optimize it. But for the brands who are really saying, like, I am someone who wants to create a certain style or design, that's the kind of thing that you're going to have to do over and over and see how it goes.
So continuing with that conversation, would it make sense for somebody who has a few different products to kind of start out with maybe just putting on maybe bestsellers or just some of their products as opposed to like their entire catalog of products?
Good question. So, if they're starting out and they do not have a website, I would start with, especially because of the time and energy it's going to be for them to take the photos and put everything, is yes. But how would they have known, Joe, what the bestsellers are? Like, where did they figure that out? So if you figured that out because you were going to some local festivals or things
Mhm.
like that, that's a great way to do it, right? And then start adding on. But other than that, it's going to be a guessing game. And what you want to do there, so you can make educated guesses, right? Because we like to make educated guesses, is two things. Look at what's trending, because that's what's going to be what people are searching for on the platforms, anyways. So pay attention to trends. That's the first thing. And trends.google.com can be great for that. But even just looking through the platform and then the stats in the platforms often tell you what's trending. And then the second thing would be to just, go with your gut. So I like a little of analytics and then a little of me. I think you need a little of both when you're running a business. Is you got to try and fail, but you have to understand why you failed, or make educated guesses and figure out where it went wrong or where it went right.
Definitely. And speaking to some of those, failures that you have to make along the way, what are some common mistakes to avoid when selling on, again, obviously each platform is going to be different in their own right, but what are some common mistakes that you'd say may come up across the board that people should look out for when they're, selling on these platforms?
Good question. The common mistake is failing to plan. So, what do I mean by that? Is they didn't take the time to go through the platform first, and then second, all the things that the customer is concerned about. So, for me, that's the planning. It's like those little friction points, like what's going to keep the person from adding it to the cart? Like, what information do you need to answer? So, that's a big thing. If those people who are most successful at selling online, period, are often answering all the questions the person has without them asking it. So how quickly does this ship? Do I have it in stock? What's its uses? Does it come in other colors? Is it sustainable? Is it packaged friendly? Like we have to think about, I know it sounds strange, lots of little things. You're not going to get them all, but I say for those of you who are really considering doing this, if you can at least think of the 10 things that your customers are going to want to know and figure out how we can answer those when we're putting our products up, I see you're going to be a step ahead of those who just are doing this like willy-nilly. And unfortunately, a lot of these platforms, that's exactly what happens is people will go at it like willy-nilly. And I understand that, but if you want to be successful, because that was the question, not just, or you can just try and see what's working. And I'm just more rather plan it out and know what I did and then check off, I did this, I did this, I did this, and what's worked and what hasn't. The data girl in me.
All come together.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about this before, but how would they selling on these platforms? How do they go about identifying and targeting your ideal customer on these platforms when they don't necessarily, you may not necessarily have the total control of like your own website, but what kind of effort should they put into identifying?
So first off, what most people don't realize is most of the platforms release a lot of information about who is on their platform. So if you go to like business.pinterest or business.tiktok, I mean, everyone's got them. Snap's got them. So does, Amazon, I think we can kind of assume the whole world is on Amazon. It's a destination. But like even Etsy has a breakdown of what their target customer is. And that's important. So go do the research about who is on the platform so you're not let down by the results. Because if your potential client or customer isn't there, and I would say it's better to be a bit niche first. So these broader platforms, they're great, but the problem is they're broader, and the broader we go, the harder it is. So think through that a bit when you're making that decision. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
I get lost in my idea of answer, and I want to make sure I answered everything. So Raphael went, I love your approach, Jen. Thank you.
So our next question here, going back a little bit to some of the questions we have received, but this one's from Michelle, a little more specific, but she's selling health and wellness products. Would you say Instagram or what other platforms would be a suitable platform for selling health and wellness to, she's trying to target women, obviously ages 35 to 60.
So that's actually an important point that you just made there, because one of the things that's been buzzing about around, health and wellness and beauty, so I'm going to add you into beauty, Michelle, is that a lot of brands have been targeting younger generations on TikTok, and they're buying things that make no sense to their generation. So if you are being very specific to that 35 and older audience, there are a couple of things. So specifically, I would be looking, actually, Instagram is a great place, because you've got now, remember, that's the millennial platforms, and millennials are what, 42 now? So, they're not 20, that's Generation Z. So I think Instagram is a great place. Ironically, other things to be looking at is even YouTube. YouTube is a little broader, so that's going to be good. But the Google Shopping, I think, is smart. So if I had to pick like one where I could storytell, and that's why with health and wellness, there's a lot of storytelling opportunities. I think Instagram is a really good spot to start.
Great. Our next one here is how important is branding when it comes to selling on discovery platforms? How can these sellers go about building a good, strong brand presence across multiple?
Such a great question, because one thing you'll find is very few people think about branding when they're looking at these platforms. And um, remember that we're talking business, not creators. Okay. So if you're a creator, you probably have the brand of you, and that can be the beginning. There are different rules for creators to sell. So I do want to bring that up because, like, when you look at like TikTok, or Instagram, if you want to keep your creator status, you may or may not be able to do that and sell on the platform, meaning having your tagged products. TikTok has a whole section about creators being able to sell. And I think that's an important point. So if you are the brand within your company, that's a different story. So I do think branding is important. And the reason it's going to be important is because you don't want the consumer to keep going through the platform to buy from you. And the only way you're going to get them to connect with you more is to really have a focus and a personality all your own so that they come directly to you next time. So many of products I have discovered because of a shop, but as long as like their quality's been good and I really believe in the company's values, I go back to the company to buy, especially if the place I discovered them no longer carries them, which is another thing that I think is important. So, you do want to think longer term, but I also don't want my startups to be like, oh my God, my brand has to be perfect. Because that's the one thing I will say about so many startups is that they fail to launch because they get so fixated on perfection that they never actually get out there to test it. And remember, brands evolve just like people. So who you are today doesn't have to be who you will be tomorrow. And you're going to want to evolve with the personality changes of your organization and also the personality changes of the platforms and the personality changes of your customers. So,
Good point.
well, Joe, I think this was a fun after show. I hope
Absolutely.
everyone enjoyed it. We're going to do this again, I think, in August, right? So we're skipping July. After show will definitely be a Jennifer thing. So for anyone who's interested, I'm on the Jennifer channel on YouTube, so subscribe. And for those of you who are just kind of picked this up, remember to stop by technologytherapy.com to sign up for some of these free webinars that we do in partnership with SCORE New York Metro, who you can also see as well. And we'll put these in the YouTube channel link after. So thanks everyone for hanging out on the Zoom after. Thanks, Joe, for moderating our conversation. And I'm excited for next time around. I'm looking for feedback. Let us know what you think, everyone. Thanks. Bye, Joe.
Bye.